Well,
Okay,
we're back.
Yes, we're back.
We're back with another week of talking about a filmmaker, and this time it was my turn, and I chose Martin Scorsese. I chose him for two reasons. One is he has a new film coming out, Wolf of Wall Street, and to me, that reminded me that even though I haven't been the biggest fan of the way that Scorsese's career has gone in the last, say, 10 years, a Scorsese film is still an event, and it's something that re-excites me about his work. In every Scorsese film, I'm hoping that it's the next, that it could be another masterpiece, right? So there's something to be said, I think, for a director that every time their film comes out, you know, it's that it's a new, you know what I mean? It's an event.
If I was asked, and somebody put a gun to my head and said, "Who is your favorite living director?" it would be Martin Scorsese.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is exactly what you just said. That even when I'm not crazy about what he's done, he's always somebody whose work I want to pay attention to. You know, there's a phrase we have in the theater where we say, you know, a work is important enough. We say, attention must be paid.
Yeah.
And Scorsese is that kind of director. I wasn't crazy about Hugo.
Yeah.
Okay. But attention must be paid. And this one, maybe I'm falling for the press and the hype, but this one looks like he's going out on a limb again.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I like about it is that he's with an actor who's interested in going out on a limb, and that is DiCaprio.
Well, he even said, and I read an interview yesterday with him where he said that DiCaprio is the person who has made him want to continue to make movies. That
Yes, I read that.
He may have given up.
Yes.
But that this young person with his enthusiasm, his passion,
Right.
excited him to take on these new projects. So I think that's really cool.
I read that interview, and
Yeah.
it was an interesting interview because what it says is Scorsese, I think he might be 2 years younger than I am, but he's in the autumn of his years.
Yeah.
And I am. And so I know that sense of, especially when you've achieved as much as he has,
Yeah.
or where you say, I'm getting a little tired.
Yeah.
I don't want to go to the edge anymore.
Yeah.
But that's why I love Scorsese, is because he goes to the edge. In that interview, the roundtable interview that we looked at, the thing that he said that thrilled me, and I always sensed it in his work, but I like the fact that he articulated it, is the fact that he makes the pictures not for the audience, but for himself. Mm-hmm. He says he wants to make the film he wants to see. Mm-hmm. And so he takes the characters wherever he wants to take them.
Yeah.
The other thing that he said in that interview that I liked was he said, once the script is written, they begin to improvise off it because he wants the characters to free themselves from the plot and take the story where they want to take it.
Yeah.
And that's what has given his film such life, is the fact that the characters really break out of the confines of the plot.
So anyway, let's segue into talking about our favorite films by Scorsese. All right, I'm going to start since this is my filmmaker. Okay. My favorite film by Scorsese would probably end up on many people's potentially most underrated, but it's my favorite, and I believe potentially his best, is a movie called After Hours. Yes. He made After Hours in the early 80s. He had done some big budget projects. He wasn't doing very well in his career. He was trying to make Last Temptation of Christ, and he basically took on what seems almost like a student film project. It has that feel to it. Went back to the streets of New York, went lower budget than he'd gone in a long time, and the film is just this dark comedy nightmare that just really does not let up from the moment that it starts. And to me, it's basically perfect. The only thing that is a disappointment is that the ending that Scorsese wanted, which is really a really abstract ending with Griffin Dunn crawling back into a woman's womb and being rebirthed in somewhere in New York, sounds so interesting to me that I wish he could have gotten approval for that, but he didn't get approval for that. But regardless of the fact, I think it's Scorsese. The Scorsese I like is not the Scorsese of Gangs in New York, the epic Scorsese. However much I can respect that or find good qualities in it, I like the Scorsese of the streets who feels like he's just out there being daring and experimental and just fast and furious. And that to me, After Hours is the crux of that. So that's my favorite of his films.
It's interesting you say that because After Hours for me, if we're going to break it down in categories, is, I was going to say, his most underrated picture.
There you go. Okay.
And the reason, I think it is a true black comedy. And that term is used very loosely.
Yeah.
But to me, it's nightmarish, it's Kafkaesque, and it's a dead-end picture.
Yeah.
Like that. All of those things being terrific qualities for a film to have. I remember when I saw it, because I know Greenwich Village fairly well, and the way he created the atmosphere of that place was just so terrific that I had never really sensed that when I was in Greenwich Village, but on film he did it for me.
Yeah. What's your favorite?
My favorite is, I guess it would be a lot of people's favorite, is Goodfellas.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is because I think everything comes together. Scorsese has this great talent, which I can't think of another director in memory right now, somebody who can do it better, but he can make me laugh at the most grisly things. The movie has one of the best beginnings I've ever seen in a movie. And traditionally, you start a picture either at the beginning of the story, or sometimes you start at the end and you go back. But he starts somewhere in the middle. And he opens with that terrific scene where they hear the bumping, and then they go in and we don't know what it is. And then they shoot the guy, I don't know how many times, stab him, and then get back in the car. And as they're driving off, Liotta's narration says, I never wanted to be president of the United States. All I ever wanted was to be a gangster. Yeah. And with that, he cuts in Tony Bennett singing, I know I'd go from rags to riches.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is the best opening of a movie I've ever seen. Yeah. But then, what I started to say was the scenes that he can make you laugh at the most grisly things is, he starts it with that sequence where the guy comes up and the guy's either been cut a shot and the guy's bleeding profusely, and Liotta's character gives him all of his towels, and the other guy yells at Liotta for doing that, and his last line is, I got to smarten up and toughen up this kid. Because it's such a weird stuff. I'm laughing, and at the same time I'm horrified by it. And the picture just keeps topping itself. Again, to use another theatrical term, Scorsese has done this in several films. We say the high criteria is astonish me. That scene astonished me. And that was just the beginning. He kept astonishing me constantly in that picture. Even with something as simple as the young lady that was going and picking up the drugs from Philadelphia to bring it back. When she turned around and said she had to go back home when time was of the essence to get her lucky hat.
Yes.
And the insistence of that, it rang so true that it was astonishing because there's something so absurd about that, but so to life. Mm-hmm. And this is the thing that Scorsese, I think, does better than anybody else. In terms of directors, the closest parallel I've seen to him was Kazan, but Kazan could never get that humor. Why I said a parallel is because he gets the performances the way Kazan did. And of course, he's a great admirer of Kazan. Letters to Ilya indicates that. But there's something, with Kazan, it was a natural evolution, Kazan being one of the great theater directors. So, his focus would be on the actors and shaking out these terrific performances. Yeah. But with Scorsese, I don't know that Scorsese's background is that much in acting. And the one time that he did try to direct on stage, it didn't work out. Okay. That was a play called The Act with Liza Minnelli. Okay. He wound up almost simultaneously at the same time directing her in New York. But at a certain point, they replaced him as the director of the plan. They brought in somebody else. And then, I don't know if you know this, but Raging Bull, the project, they really had a lot of ambition for that. Because the idea was that they were going to shoot the film by day, but they were going to have a play written. And De Niro was going to perform it, directed by Scorsese. De Niro was going to perform it on stage at night.
Interesting.
And at a certain point, they abandoned that idea, and then they just went for it.
There was a lot of ambition, yeah.
But the stage thing, what I'm saying is that Kazan came from the stage, so it was expected that he'd know how to lead actors into sensational performances. But
it's unexpected with Scorsese.
Completely. But that's the strongest thing of his films.
He doesn't get credit as being a great actor's director, but he is a great
actor's
director.
And a lot of people win awards with his work, too.
That's true.
Yeah. And so, again, you're looking at a film that, to me, isn't organically his kind of material. I mean, it's his kind of material, but he doesn't feel organic to it. That's The Departed, the one that he got his Oscar for.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, what elevates that picture is the performances again. I mean, he gets such vivid performances that it goes past the fact that you can sense, I can sense anyway, that he really isn't that in tune with Boston politics and Boston gangster corruption.
Boston culture.
Yes, completely. You just didn't get that feeling, but it's there.
So, moving on real quick. So did you want to talk about a film that you felt was another film that you felt like was underrated, or did you want to touch on After Hours Alone?
I think Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore is a highly underrated picture. It's one of my favorite because he shots it so simply.
Yeah. And
that's that's another thing is we live in an era where directors show you they're directing a lot. And Scorsese, his films are full of razzle-dazzle, but they fit the subject.
Yeah.
But when he got to Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, he backed off. Mm-hmm. And that's what helps that film flow so nicely. Yeah. That, to me, is a highly underrated film. It's one that you never hear mentioned in the Scorsese body of work.
Well, going through, I agree with that one completely. Going through his filmography when thinking about doing our little episode here, he has almost as many underrated pictures as he has established classics, I guess you could call them. I mean, for every Goodfellas, there's a Casino, because Casino's underrated.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
And even films like, even if they're not perfect, films like we talked about last week, Bringing Out the Dead, they're underrated because there's a lot still to be mined there, right? Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. My underrated pick is Age of Innocence. I think that Age of Innocence is always overlooked. And if I picked After Hours for that kind of Scorsese that I like, Age of Innocence is the complete opposite. Yes. It's on the other end, which I think is so cool. And again, he takes this Edith Wharton novel and he doesn't try to get in there and fix it or make it him. To me, he's able to relax and just really bring the spirit of that work to the screen. And you wouldn't know that it's a Scorsese movie necessarily unless you're just watching really, really closely. But he shoots it very simply, other than some really nice stuff. I don't know if you remember the stuff that he does with the paintings, which I think is nice. But for the most part, he just steps back like he did with Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore and just lets the story and the performances take over. And I love that film.
I particularly like that film, and I'll tell you why. Above and beyond the film itself, when Raging Bull won several awards, the Academy Awards, one of the older actresses was given, and I don't remember who she was, but it was a Loretta Young era actress. It may have even been Loretta Young, I don't remember. But anyway, when she came up and she accepted her award, she said something that I took as a slam at Raging Bull, where she said, hopefully films will go back to being these romantic stories and not these harsh, unpleasant stories, and etc. Something to that effect. And I remember thinking it was a sour remark, and it was attempt at insulting the aesthetic of Raging Bull.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I love is that he turned around, and I don't know if he even took it that way, but he turned around and he takes Edith Wharton's work, which I know quite well because my wife has read almost the entire body of Edith Wharton's work, and I've read several of them simply because she likes them so much. And he makes a film more romantic, more of the period, in a lot of ways more elegant than any film that actress who was looking for elegance in cinema has ever done.
True.
And I wanted to kiss him for that.
For doing it. Yeah.
Like that.
Who knows what,
I don't know if that,
or if it
that's
just
how I took
inspired
it.
him.
Yes. Well, I mean, you can't just do it something in order to slam back somebody, but it's just that his range is so terrific.
And like, he made Goodfellas in 1990. In 1993, there's Age of Innocence.
Yes.
And there's really, you put those movies back to back and you go, look at the range.
And if you take away the credits, nobody would ever believe the same director did it.
Yeah. And I think that's a beautiful thing. I don't think, some people
would
say that that's a bad thing.
I love that for the flexibility.
Yeah.
The Overrated.
The Overrated. Okay, you go first.
Okay.
I can guess.
Okay, but Cape Fear.
Yes.
Cape Fear for me.
I knew you were going to
the reason I felt, I think I wrote an article about it after I saw the movie, is because I felt that it was a situation where everybody in the picture was overqualified. In the interview that you talk about, that you read yesterday, he talks about some projects that he did because
he got stuck?
He got stuck in them. I'd like to think that was one of them. This is a film where everything that was simple and potent in the original became overly complicated and overworked to the point where it was just irritating to me to watch the picture. Oddly enough, it was his biggest commercial success at the time, which is typical also. Yeah. But that to me is a very overrated picture.
My overrated pick, and you addressed it already, is The Departed. And I want to preface this as saying that I enjoy the shit out of The Departed. I think it's a fun movie to watch.
Yeah, we saw it together. Right?
Yeah. And I think it's a fun movie to watch. However, it makes me sad to watch it because to me, there's an element, like he's got the actors doing fun things and it moves fast, but there's an element to it where I feel a lack of passion in it. And I hate to watch a Scorsese film and feel just like that. It's like a void of passion. That's what I really like seeing in his work, and that I hope is in Wolf of Wall Street. Right. And other than my favorite scenes in that movie are the scenes with DiCaprio and the woman.
Yes,
Vera Farmiga. Yes. The romantic scenes. Right. And there were those scenes in the film that I felt, all of a sudden I felt something come alive. And the rest of it to me is just, it's workmanlike directing. You know, it's director for hire directing. It shows how talented he is and shows that you can pretty much give him any script, any genre, and he can give you something that's fun to watch. But it makes me sad to watch it. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, I understand what you're saying.
And it also makes me sad because he, again, who gives a shit about the Academy Awards, but he won for that film, and it's his least interesting work.
But you said something which now suddenly makes me, we should actually talk about fantasy projects. Okay. But as you're saying that, where you say, he's working in a milieu, so to speak, that isn't natural to him, but his craft really brings it to a certain level. I wonder, what would he do with a Western?
Exactly.
It would be interesting just because it'd probably be crazy.
Well, because he loves Westerns.
Yes, I know. Yeah. I know. And all I can think is that he'd give us probably a variation. I mean, not plot-wise or anything, but something as off the wall as Duel in the Sun.
Yeah.
Where Duel in the Sun.
Which is one of his favorite movies.
Yes, I know. But it's one of mine too.
Yeah.
But it's so batshit.
Yeah.
Because it is a genuine florid opera of sorts, you see. And so, but again, when you get a great director, like Scorsese, most likely is, you want to see him try these different
genres,
things,
you do.
like that, because it would be fun.
Yeah, and I wanted to say two things to close, right? And I agree. I'm constantly learning, and the two things were this: that the one projects that we have not talked about Scorsese's is his documentaries, and he's made several documentaries. He's made things about George Harrison. He's making one on Bill Clinton right now. Bob Dylan, right? I find some more interesting than others, but the ones that he made specifically about movies, Personal Journey Through American Cinema and My Voyage to Italy, are just infused with his passion, and those are the films that I have always wanted to be a filmmaker. Watching those documentaries solidified my desire to be a filmmaker. I can't remember watching them when I was like 15, and just the minute I stopped watching them, I picked up a camera and just started filming things, and I just knew then, like, I have to be a filmmaker. So I'll always be indebted to him for those films, and for like taking the time to pour out his passion for it and like share that, and I really appreciate that. And the other thing I wanted to say is that I hope you feel this way, is that us doing these talks re-excites me about the filmmakers.
Oh, absolutely.
I look at their films, I think about movies I haven't seen in years, I think about movies I want to rewatch the films, I get excited about Scorsese's work again, about Godard's work, and I hope, my desire is that with these talks, whoever's watching this, right, whoever wants to sit in this room and talk and sort of listen and talk back, hopefully, I hope you're talking back, saying, I hate you for hating Departed, hope you're arguing with us. But I also hope that the desire with this series is that it excites you about film, and it makes you want to re-investigate these people's work.
The other thing I want to say about Scorsese before we end, and he did something that I used to ask about when I was a young student. Acting student is what I was. But I would see all of these French films, I'd see all these Italian films, German films, British films too. Yeah. And I got a very good sense of the place where the films were being, the locale of the stories, France, that Truffaut and Godard were shooting around. The same thing with Italy. I mean, I got to know various streets in Italy, like they were my neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And I would say to friends, etc., I say, how come I don't get that in American film? We call it pride of place, really. And Scorsese, as I recall, was the first to really do that, to really, using New York the way he did. Mm-hmm. Suddenly, you started getting a sense that he knew the terrain, and these stories were interesting, and that he had a sense of pride about coming from there. And then, in that wake, other filmmakers came along and they started doing it. Because for me, so many films coming out of Hollywood, even when they took place in New York, it was a generic New York. Yeah. It was really a Hollywood set made up to look like New York. So there was no sense of place. And he did that, which is probably from his, he got that from looking at all those foreign films. Sure. So I'm glad you mentioned the documentaries, because that's something a lot of people don't see and don't realize that he's done that, because he is a complete filmmaker. Yeah. And yes, I agree with you that it excites me. That's my whole life is talking about movies. But I hope that it ignites the passion, if only in one person, to go out and do it. Then we've succeeded and solved our reason for being here.
Do you now, real quick before we end, do you know what filmmaker you're picking for next week?
Alfred Hitchcock.
There we go. I wanted to give you a little teaser. So if you watch to this point, next week
will be Alfred Hitchcock.
Goodbye for now.
Bye.